Let's begin. Reed Anderson pulled into the hospital parking garage at 6:47 a.m., the December frost still clinging to his windshield. As a trauma surgeon at St. Catherine's, the early shifts had become second nature over his 12 years at the hospital. He grabbed his thermos of black coffee, the good stuff Charlie had learned to make just the way he liked it, and headed toward the employee entrance. His phone buzzed. A text from his son. "Good luck with your surgeries today, Dad. Don't forget we're building the treehouse frame when you get home." Reed smiled, typing back quickly. "Wouldn't miss it for anything, kiddo. Love you." Charlie had turned 9 last month, and Reed had noticed the change in him lately. The boy was quieter around Melinda's family, more withdrawn during their Sunday dinners at the Escobar house. Reed's wife insisted it was just a phase, that her nephew Donnie was helping Charlie toughen up. But Reed had been a quiet kid once too, and he recognized the signs of something else. The morning passed in a blur of rounds and a particularly complex surgery on a motorcycle accident victim. By noon, Reed was reviewing patient charts in his office when his phone rang. Dr. Patricia Saunders, the chief of pediatrics and one of his closest friends at the hospital. "Reed, are you free for lunch? I need to talk to you about something." They met at the cafeteria. Patricia's expression was serious, professional, but her eyes held something else, concern that went beyond collegial courtesy. "I saw Charlie in the waiting room last week," she said, stirring her soup without eating it. "Melinda brought him in for a checkup. Reed, there were bruises on his upper arms. When I asked about them, Melinda said he fell playing with his cousin." Reed's grip tightened on his fork. "What kind of bruises?" "Fingerprint patterns. 4 on each arm, consistent with being grabbed hard by an adult." Patricia leaned forward. "I documented it, but Melinda's explanation was plausible enough that I couldn't push further without more evidence. I'm telling you this as your friend, not as a mandatory reporter yet, but if I see Charlie again with similar marks." "I understand." Reed's mind was already racing. "Thank you for telling me." That evening, Reed watched his son more carefully as they worked on the treehouse. Charlie was enthusiastic about the project, his usual bright self when it was just the two of them. But when Melinda called them in for dinner and mentioned that her sister Charlene was coming over with Donnie, Reed saw at the slight tensing of Charlie's shoulders, the way his smile dimmed just a fraction. Over the next 2 weeks, Reed started documenting everything. He noticed how Charlie dreaded family gatherings, how he'd come home from days at the Escobar house more subdued. When Reed suggested they skip the upcoming Sunday dinner, Melinda exploded. "What's wrong with you?" she snapped, slamming the laundry basket on the counter. "They're my family, Reed. Charlie needs to spend time with his cousins." "You're being paranoid." "I'm being observant," Reed said calmly. "Charlie seems uncomfortable around them. That's ridiculous. Charlene adores him. My parents adore him. You're creating problems where there aren't any." Melinda's face hardened. "I'm tired of you trying to isolate us from my family. It's controlling." Reed recognized the manipulation tactic, turning his concern into an accusation against him. He'd seen it before, small instances over the years that he'd brushed aside. But this was about Charlie. "I'm not isolating anyone. I'm protecting our son." "From what?" "From people who love him. You're the one who's always gone, Reed. Always at the hospital or at conferences. You barely know what happens at home anymore." The argument ended with Melinda storming out. Reed found Charlie sitting on the stairs, having heard everything. "I'm okay, Dad," Charlie said quietly. "I can handle it." Reed sat beside his son, putting an arm around him. "You shouldn't have to handle anything, buddy. Can you tell me what happens at Grandma and Grandpa Escobar's house?" Charlie was silent for a long moment. "Donnie says I'm weak because I don't like football. He calls me names. Sometimes Aunt Charlene laughs." "Has anyone ever hurt you there? Physically?" Charlie looked at his hands. "Mom says I'm being too sensitive. That they're just joking around." Reed felt something cold settle in his chest. "Charlie, look at me. It's not okay for anyone to hurt you or make you feel bad about yourself. Ever. Do you understand?" His son nodded, but Reed could see the confusion in his eyes, the conflict between what his mother said and what his father was telling him. The conference invitation came in early December. 3 days in Chicago, presenting on trauma response protocols. Normally, Reed would decline anything that took him away during the holidays, but Melinda had been pushing for it. "It's good for your career," she'd said. "Besides, Charlie and I have plans with my family for those days anyway." My parents want us to stay at their place, make cookies, do the whole Christmas preparation thing. Something about her eagerness bothered Reed, but he couldn't pinpoint why. He agreed to go, booking his flight for December 22nd. The Chicago Conference Hotel was nice enough, but Reed spent most of his time thinking about Charlie. They'd FaceTimed twice since he'd arrived, and his son seemed fine, if a bit subdued. Melinda had been short during their calls, barely speaking to him. On December 23rd, Reed's presentation went well. He was networking in the hotel bar when his phone buzzed with a notification, a text from Nolan Schmidt, his next-door neighbor. "Reed, I need you to call me. It's about Charlie. I have video." Reed's blood went cold. He stepped outside into the freezing Chicago night and called immediately. "Nolan, what's going on? Look, I debated whether to send this to you." Nolan's voice was strained. "I heard yelling from your yard earlier. Went to my window and saw." "Reed, I recorded it because I thought you might need evidence. I'm sending it now. I'm so sorry." The video file came through. Reed's hands shook as he pressed play. The footage was taken from Nolan's second-floor window, looking down into the Andersons' backyard. It was raining, and the timestamp showed 4:37 p.m., less than 2 hours ago. Charlie stood in the center of the yard, soaked, his small frame shaking. Around him stood 7 people: Melinda, her sister Charlene, their parents Gerald and Trudy Escobar, and 3 others Reed recognized as Melinda's brother Heath and his wife Colleen, and Charlene's husband Landon. As Reed watched, paralyzed, Gerald stepped forward and slapped Charlie across the face. The sound was audible even through the rain and window glass. "That's for disrespecting your mother," Gerald's voice carried. Then Trudy stepped up, another slap, harder. "That's for being ungrateful." One by one, they each took their turn. Charlene slapped him twice. Heath shoved him to the ground before slapping him. Colleen's hit snapped Charlie's head to the side. Landon grabbed his arm hard enough that Charlie cried out. Through it all, Charlie didn't run. He stood there, taking it, tears mixing with rain on his face. Melinda went last. She walked up to Charlie, who looked at her with something that broke Reed's heart, hope that she would stop this. Instead, she slapped him harder than any of them, then grabbed him by his wet shirt. "You embarrassed me in front of my family," she hissed, crying like a baby because Donnie was playing a little rough. "You're pathetic." She shoved Charlie toward the back door, but instead of letting him in, she pulled the door shut and locked it. Charlie tried the handle, then turned back, confused. "Mom, you can stay out here until you learn some respect," Melinda said through the glass. "Maybe the cold will toughen you up." In the corner of the frame, visible on the covered porch, Donnie stood watching. He was laughing, pointing at Charlie, and making crying gestures. The video ended. Reed watched it again, then a third time. His hands had stopped shaking. They were steady now, surgeon steady, as something cold and calculating settled over him. He called Nolan back. "How long was he out there?" "I called the cops after 10 minutes. Anonymous tip about a child in distress. They showed up about 20 minutes after this video ends. By then, Melinda had brought him inside. Told the officers it was a misunderstanding, that Charlie had locked himself out by accident. They bought it, especially with her whole family backing her story. Where's Charlie now? I saw them pack up and leave about an hour ago. Big SUV full of people. They headed toward the Escobar house, I think." Reed was already pulling up flights on his phone. "Nolan, I need you to do something for me. I need you to make copies of that video. Put them on a flash drive, upload them to a secure cloud, email them to yourself. Do it right now." "Already done." "Reed, what are you going to do?" "I'm coming home." Reed found a flight leaving in 3 hours. "I'm booking 2 tickets. One for me and one for someone who's going to make sure those people never touch my son again." He hung up and scrolled through his contacts, stopping at a name he hadn't called in 8 years. His finger hovered over it for just a moment before he pressed dial. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered. "Reed? It's been a while." "Claire," Reed said. "I need your help. It's about my son." Claire Franco had been Reed's mentor during his residency, but she'd left medicine after 15 years to become a child advocate attorney. She specialized in cases of parental abuse and custody battles, with a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in protecting children. She'd tried to stay in touch with Reed over the years, But he'd been so focused on his marriage and career that they'd drifted apart. "Tell me everything," Claire said, her voice immediately shifting to professional mode. Reed sent her the video while he talked, explaining Charlie's bruises, Patricia's concerns, the gaslighting from Melinda, everything. When he finished, there was a long silence. "Reed, this is prosecutable abuse. Multiple perpetrators, premeditation, a child victim who's clearly in danger. I can have emergency custody papers drawn up tonight. Can you fly to Seattle tomorrow morning? I can be on the first flight out of Boston." Good. Reed was already booking her ticket. "Because we're going to do this right. We're going to document everything, build an airtight case, and I'm going to make sure every single person in that video pays for what they did to my son." "What about Melinda? She's your wife." Reed's voice was flat, emotionless in the way it got during complicated surgeries when he couldn't afford to feel. "She stopped being my wife the moment she put her hands on our child. Now she's just another defendant." He hung up and booked the tickets, then made 2 more calls. The first was to Patricia, who agreed to meet them at his house tomorrow to examine Charlie. The second was to Ian Mann, a private investigator who'd helped the hospital with a fraud case last year. "Ian, I need complete backgrounds on 7 people. Criminal history, financial records, employment, everything you can get legally, and a few things you probably can't. I need it in 48 hours. That's a tight timeline. I'm paying triple your rate. And Ian, this is about child abuse. These people hurt my son." There was a pause. "Send me the names. You'll have everything in 24 hours. Reed sent the email, then sat on the hotel bed and watched the video one more time. He memorized each face, each blow, the cruel satisfaction in their expressions. His son's pain. He thought about Melinda, about the life they'd built together. Somewhere in the past 9 years, she'd chosen her family over their child, chosen cruelty over love, chosen to become someone Reed didn't recognize. But he recognized the look in Charlie's eyes in that video. He'd seen it before in patients who'd given up, who'd stopped fighting. His son had learned to just take it, to endure, because the people who were supposed to protect him were the ones hurting him. That ended now. Reed packed his bag and headed to the airport. He had 3 hours on the flight to plan exactly how he was going to destroy the Escobar family. The flight felt endless. Reed watched the video again, this time with a surgeon's eye for detail. Gerald Escobar slapped with an open palm, full force. That suggested he'd done it before, knew how to hit hard without leaving marks that would last. Charlene's double slap was personal, emotional. She'd enjoyed it. Heath's shove before the hit showed aggression, physicality. He was the dangerous one if things got physical. But it was Melinda's actions that told Reed the most. The way she'd controlled the situation, orchestrated it. This wasn't a spontaneous loss of temper. This was calculated punishment. A family ritual. How many times had this happened before? Claire met him at baggage claim. She looked the same sharp gray suit, short auburn hair, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who spent her days in courtrooms. She handed him a coffee. "I've reviewed the video 12 times, she said as they walked to Reed's car. "I've already drafted emergency custody petitions and restraining orders. Judge Levi O'Connell owes me a favor. He'll sign them tomorrow morning, even though it's Christmas Eve. We'll need Charlie's testimony and a medical examination. Patricia Saunders is standing by. She's the chief of pediatrics at Street Catherine's." Good. The medical evidence combined with the video should be enough for emergency removal. But Reed, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. Melinda will fight this. Let her fight. I have video evidence of her abusing our son. She'll claim you manipulated the situation, that Charlie's lying, that her family was just disciplining him appropriately. They'll paint you as the controlling husband trying to isolate them. Reed glanced at Claire. She already tried that angle. 2 weeks ago, when I suggested we skip Sunday dinner at her parents' house. Claire nodded. Classic Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. She's been setting up this narrative for a while, Reed, which means the abuse has been happening for a while. They drove in silence for a moment. Reed's hands were tight on the steering wheel. "I need to know everything about these people," he said finally. "Not just for the custody case. I need to know what they care about, what they're afraid of, where they're vulnerable." Claire looked at him carefully. "Reed, my job is to protect Charlie through legal channels. What exactly are you planning?" I'm planning to make sure they understand what they've done. That there are consequences, real ones. Be careful. If you do anything that compromises the custody case, I won't. Everything I do will be documented, legal, and above board. Reed's smile was cold, but that doesn't mean it won't hurt. They reached Reed's house at 11 p.m. The place was dark, empty. Reed walked through rooms that suddenly felt contaminated. His home, where his son should have been safe, had become a place of fear. In Charlie's room, Reed found the treehouse plans they'd drawn together still on the desk, a half-finished Lego set. A photo of Charlie and Reed from last summer, fishing at Lake Washington, both grinning at the camera. No photos of Melinda with Charlie, Reed realized. None in the room at all. Claire appeared in the doorway. I've set up in your home office. Ian Mann sent over preliminary reports on all 7 subjects. Reed, there's something you should see. In the office, Claire had her laptop open with files displayed. This is Gerald Escobar's employment history. He was fired from 3 jobs in the past 15 years for disciplinary issues. Reading between the lines of the HR reports Ian obtained, he has anger management problems. Witnesses reported him shoving subordinates. Verbal abuse. She clicked to another file. Charlene Escobar, well, Charlene Alvarado now. She's had CPS called on her twice regarding Donnie. Both times, the cases were dropped after the family provided statements. Want to guess who vouched for her parenting? Melinda. Among others. It's a pattern. They protect each other. Cover for each other. Claire pulled up more files. Heath Escobar has a DUI from 6 years ago that got pleaded down. Landon Alvarado has a restraining order from an ex-girlfriend claiming domestic violence, also pleaded down to disturbing the peace. They're all enablers, Reed said. A whole family system built around protecting the abusers. Exactly. And Charlie's been trapped in the middle of it. Claire closed the laptop. We're going to get him out. Tomorrow morning, we go before Judge O'Connell, get the emergency order, and then we go pick up your son. What about tonight? Charlie's there with them right now. I know. But we need the legal authority first. If you show up there now, they'll call the cops, claim you're being erratic, use it against you. We wait until we have the paperwork. Then we move. Reed nodded, though every instinct screamed at him to get in his car and drive to the Escobar house right now. But Claire was right. This had to be done carefully. Get some rest, Claire said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But Reed didn't sleep. He spent the night in his office, reading through every page of Ian's reports, learning everything about the 7 people who'd hurt his son. Their jobs, their finances, their secrets. And he began to plan. Judge Levi O'Connell signed the emergency custody order at 9 a.m. on Christmas Eve. By 9:45, Reed, Claire, and 2 police officers were standing on the doorstep of the Escobar house. Trudy Escobar answered the door, her face going pale when she saw the police. We have an emergency custody order for Charlie Anderson, Claire said, handing over the papers. We're here to remove him from the premises immediately. You can't do this. Trudy's voice rose. Melinda appeared, with Charlie behind her. When Charlie saw Reed, his face lit up with relief and hope that made Reed's heart break all over again. Dad! Charlie tried to run forward, but Melinda grabbed his shoulder, holding him back. Reed, what the hell are you doing? Melinda's face was flushed with anger. You can't just show up here with cops and... I can, and I am. Reed's voice was level, controlled. He looked past Melinda to his son. Charlie, come here, buddy. You're going home with me. One of the officers stepped forward. Ma'am, please release the child. The next few minutes were chaos. Gerald Escobar came storming in, shouting about lawyers and rights. Charlene started filming on her phone until one of the officers told her to stop. The whole family converged, trying to intimidate through sheer numbers. But Claire stood firm, the legal documents in her hand like a shield. If you interfere with this court order, you will be arrested for obstruction. Charlie is coming with his father. You will all receive notice of the custody hearing scheduled for next week. Finally, Melinda released Charlie's shoulder. The boy ran to Reed, who scooped him up even though he was getting too big for it. Charlie buried his face in Reed's shoulder. I want to go home, Dad. Please take me home. I've got you, Reed whispered. I've got you. And you're safe now. I promise. As they walked to the car, Reed heard Melinda screaming behind them, her mother and sister joining in. Threats, accusations, promises that they'd fight this. Let them fight, Reed thought. They had no idea what was coming. In the car, Charlie was silent, staring out the window. Reed wanted to ask him everything, but Claire gave him a small shake of her head. Later, after the medical exam, after they documented everything properly, at Reed's house, Patricia was waiting. She examined Charlie gently, professionally, taking photographs of the bruises that were still visible, documenting the finger-shaped marks on his arms, the fading handprints on his face. She asked careful questions, and Charlie answered them haltingly at first. Then in a rush, as if a dam had broken. Donnie said I was stupid. Then he pushed me down the stairs at Grandma's house. When I told Mom, she said I was lying. Then Grandma said I was causing problems, and Grandpa got mad. The story poured out. Months of psychological abuse, physical intimidation, isolation. They'd convinced Charlie that he was the problem, that he deserved their treatment, that if he just tried harder to be what they wanted, they'd stop. They said you didn't love me anymore, Charlie said, looking at Reed with wet eyes. That you were going to leave us because I wasn't good enough. Reed pulled his son close. Charlie, listen to me. None of that is true. Not one word. I love you more than anything in this world. What they did to you, it wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. Patricia finished her examination and pulled Reed aside while Claire sat with Charlie. He has old bruises layered with new ones, she said quietly. This has been systematic and ongoing. I'm filing a report with CPS and the police. There's enough here for criminal charges. Good. Reed watched his son through the doorway, seeing how small he looked on the couch. What about psychological damage? He'll need therapy. The good news is he's resilient, and he clearly knows you're his safe person. With proper support, he'll recover. But Reed, this is going to be hard for him. The custody battle, potentially testifying, watching his mother and her family face consequences. He won't have to do it alone. Patricia left to file her reports. Claire made calls to various agencies, setting wheels in motion, and Reed sat with Charlie, watching a Christmas movie, just being present. But in his mind, he was running through the plan he'd formulated during the sleepless night. The Escobar family thought they were untouchable, protected by their numbers and their willingness to lie for each other. They were wrong. The custody hearing was set for December 30th, but Reed didn't wait for the legal process to run its course before he started implementing his plan. He'd learned something crucial from Ian Mann's background reports. Every member of the Escobar family had something to lose. Gerald Escobar was the patriarch, a retired fire chief who served on several community boards and was up for a position on the city planning commission. His reputation was everything to him. Trudy Escobar volunteered at a local church and ran a small catering business on the side, built entirely on word of mouth and community connections. Heath Escobar worked as a manager at a manufacturing plant, with aspirations to move up to regional director. His wife Colleen taught at a private elementary school. Charlene ran a mommy blog with a modest but dedicated following, monetized through sponsorships and affiliate links. Her whole brand was built on being a perfect mother. Landon Alvarado was a real estate agent whose success depended on trust and client referrals. And Melinda was a social worker, ironically, working with at-risk youth. Each of them had built their lives on an image of respectability. Reed was about to shatter that image. On December 26th, Reed received a call from Marty Gill, a journalist at the Seattle Times who specialized in investigative pieces on child welfare. They'd met 2 years ago when Marty was researching an article on hospital protocols for suspected abuse cases. Dr. Anderson, I heard through the grapevine that you might have a story for me, Marty said. Something about systemic family abuse? Reed had anticipated this. Ian Mann, at Reed's direction, had accidentally let information slip to a source who had connections to various media outlets. Plausible deniability, but effective. I can't comment on an ongoing custody case, Reed said carefully, but I can tell you that if someone were to request the public records related to emergency custody order number, he rattled off the case number, they might find some very disturbing video evidence that was submitted to the Appen court. Public record. Right. Marty was already typing. And if someone wanted to understand the broader context of how entire family systems enable abuse, then they might want to look into Gerald Escobar's employment terminations, the CPS reports regarding Charlene Alvarado, and the professional licensing requirements for social workers who commit child abuse. There was a pause. Dr. Anderson, I need to ask, are you sure you want this out there? Once it's public, there's no taking it back. Reed thought of Charlie, of the fear in his son's eyes in that video, of the way he'd said, I can handle it in that small, defeated voice. I'm sure. These people hurt a child, my child, and they've been getting away with it because they protect each other. Someone needs to break that protection. If it costs them their reputations, their careers, their comfortable lives, good. They should have thought of that before they laid hands on a 9-year-old. I'll start digging, Marty said. This might take a few days. Take your time. Be thorough. I want the story to be bulletproof. The next call Reed made was to the Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families. He asked to speak with the licensing board that oversaw social workers. I need to file a formal complaint against one of your licensed social workers for child abuse, he said. I have video evidence and medical reports. The woman on the other end of the line sounded skeptical at first until Reed sent her the video. Then her tone changed dramatically. Mr. Anderson, I'm going to need to forward this to our investigative unit immediately. What's the social worker's name? Melinda Anderson. Née Escobar. License number. He read off the number from the documents Claire had pulled. She works for King County Family Services. We'll be in touch within 48 hours. Mr. Anderson, I want you to know that this is exactly the kind of report we take very seriously. A social worker abusing a child it's unconscionable. Yes, Reed said quietly. It is. He hung up and checked his watch. Claire was in court filing additional motions. Patricia was preparing her medical testimony. Ian Mann was digging deeper into the Escobar family finances. Reed had a feeling there might be some tax irregularities worth exploring. And tomorrow, Reed had appointments scheduled with the principal of the private school, where Colleen Escobar taught, the regional director of Heath's manufacturing company, and Charlene's 3 biggest blog sponsors. He wasn't going to physically hurt any of them. He didn't need to. He was going to systematically dismantle the comfortable lives they'd built while abusing his son. Every pillar of their respectability, every source of income, every shred of reputation, he was going to tear it all down using nothing but the truth. That night, Reed made dinner for Charlie mac and cheese, the way his son liked it. They ate together and talked about neutral things. Video games, the treehouse they'd finished building, places they might visit next summer. But when Charlie was getting ready for bed, he stopped in the doorway of his room. Dad, are they going to make me go back? Reed knelt down so he was eye level with his son. No, I promise you, Charlie, you will never have to go back to that house. You're staying with me, where you're safe. What about Mom? That was harder to answer. Your mom. She made choices that hurt you. Adult choices that have adult consequences. Right now, the most important thing is that you're safe and loved. Charlie nodded slowly. I loved her. I really did. But she scared me. Dad. They all scared me. I know, buddy. I know. And I'm sorry I wasn't there to protect you sooner. You're here now. Charlie hugged him tight. That's what matters. After Charlie fell asleep, Reed sat in his home office and reviewed his progress. The dominoes were starting to fall. Tomorrow, they'd fall faster. By December 28th, the first cracks in the Escobar family's facade were becoming visible. Charlene's blog sponsors had all received anonymous emails containing screenshots from the video carefully edited to protect Charlie's identity, but clearly showing a woman matching Charlene's description striking a child. 2 of her biggest sponsors dropped her immediately. Her Instagram comments filled with questions about the rumors of abuse. The principal of Colleen's school received a formal complaint from concerned parents, manufactured by Ian Mann through his network, along with information about her presence in the abuse video. The school placed her on administrative leave pending investigation. Heath's regional director received an anonymous tip about his DUI and the company's strict policy against employing people with recent criminal records. An internal review was launched. The church where Trudy volunteered received a politely worded letter from several concerned congregation members asking about their policy on child abuse and whether volunteers were properly vetted. The letter included a link to the public court records. Landon found his real estate office suddenly flooded with negative online reviews, all from accounts created in the past week, all mentioning concerns about character and trustworthiness. and Gerald received a letter from the City Planning Commission indicating that his nomination was under review due to concerning allegations brought to the commission's attention. Reed tracked it all from his home office, watching the chaos unfold with grim satisfaction. None of it was illegal. All of it was information they'd put out there themselves, consequences they'd earned through their actions. He was just making sure those consequences finally caught up with them. Claire called on the evening of the 28th. Reed, the Escobars have hired a lawyer. Burton Prince. He's expensive and he's vicious. They're going to claim that you orchestrated a smear campaign against them. Did I? Reed asked mildly. Don't play games. I know what you're doing. And while I'm not saying they don't deserve it, you need to be careful. If the judge thinks you're manipulating public opinion to bias the custody case, I haven't manipulated anything. I filed complaints with the appropriate licensing boards. I provided public record information to a journalist. I made sure the right people had access to the truth about what happened. That's not manipulation, Claire. That's transparency. Burton Prince won't see it that way. Then, Burton Prince can prove I did something illegal. Good luck to him. Claire sighed. The hearing is in 2 days. How's Charlie? Better. We started him with a therapist yesterday. Dr. Jack Moss. Specializes in childhood trauma. He's good. And how are you? Reed paused. I'm doing what needs to be done. Reed. They hurt my son, Claire. They abused him systematically, made him think he deserved it, isolated him, terrorized him. And they did it as a family, all protecting each other, thinking they were untouchable. So yes, I'm making sure they face consequences. Real ones. Permanent ones. If that makes me vindictive, I can live with that. There was a long silence. Then Claire said, For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. But don't lose yourself in the revenge, Reed. Charlie needs his father, not a crusader. I know. I won't let it consume me, but I will see it through. After he hung up, Reed received a text from Ian Mann. Found something interesting about Melinda's finances. Call me. Ian answered on the first ring. So, I was going through the bank records you gave me authorization to access as part of the custody case. Did you know that Melinda has been making monthly payments to her parents? $2,000 a month for the past 4 years. What? From our joint account? No, from a separate account in her name only. But here's where it gets interesting. The money in that account came from your joint savings. She's been slowly transferring funds for years. Technically not illegal since it was marital property, but it's definitely shady. And get this, those payments to her parents coincide with when their catering business was failing. She essentially bailed them out. Reed felt a cold understanding settle over him. She's been buying their loyalty or paying them off. More likely both. And there's something else. Remember how Charlene had those CPS calls? I found email exchanges between Melinda and her sister. Melinda coached Charlene on what to say, how to present herself, how to make the allegations go away. She used her position as a social worker to help her sister avoid investigation. That's ethics violations on top of everything else. Yep, I've documented everything. Might want to pass it along to her licensing board. Reed did exactly that, along with an email to Melinda's supervisor at King County Family Services. He was methodical about it, including timestamps, evidence, chains, every detail that would make the case impossible to dismiss. The next morning, December 29th, Marty Gill's article went live. The headline read, When Family Systems Enable Abuse, How One Child Fell Through the Cracks Despite Multiple Warning Signs. It was devastating. Marty had done his homework, corroborating every detail with public records and interviews. He'd gotten statements from Nolan Schmidt, from Patricia Saunders speaking carefully within HIPAA bounds, from the police officers who'd responded to the scene. He detailed the history of complaints against various family members, the pattern of protection and cover-ups. And he'd included screenshots from the video faces blurred, but the violence unmistakable. The article went viral by noon. Local news picked it up. Social media erupted. The Escobar family's phone numbers and addresses were suddenly public knowledge, with angry people calling and driving by. Reed had anticipated this might happen. He'd actually hoped it wouldn't go quite this far. He'd wanted professional consequences, not vigilante harassment. But he couldn't control the public's outrage, and part of him thought maybe the Escobars needed to understand what it felt like to be scared in their own homes. Claire called, furious. Reed, did you give Marty Gill that video? The video was part of the public court record. Anyone could have accessed it. Don't play dumb. The Escobar's lawyer is going to argue that you created a hostile environment that makes a fair hearing impossible. Then the hearing should be moved to a different venue. The evidence doesn't change. You're right, but Reed, their house got egged last night. Someone spray-painted child abusers on their driveway. This is getting out of hand. Reed felt a small pang of guilt. He hadn't wanted violence, even property damage. That's not on me. I didn't tell anyone to do that. I know, but the optics are bad. Just be prepared for Burton Prince to use this against you tomorrow. The custody hearing began at 9 a.m. on December 30th. Judge O'Connell's courtroom was packed unusual for a family court proceeding, but the media attention had made this a spectacle. Reed sat at the plaintiff's table with Claire. Across the aisle, Melinda sat with Burton Prince and her entire family. They all looked exhausted, angry, defiant. Judge O'Connell was a severe-looking man in his 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. He'd reviewed all the filings and evidence before the hearing, and his expression suggested he was not pleased with anyone in his courtroom. "Let me be clear from the start," he said. "This court's primary concern is the welfare of the minor child, Charlie Anderson. Everything else is secondary. I've reviewed the video evidence, the medical reports, the witness statements, and the various allegations flying between both parties. We're going to proceed methodically through the facts." Burton Prince stood. "Your Honor, before we begin, I need to address the egregious misconduct by the plaintiff. Dr. Anderson has orchestrated a campaign of harassment against my clients, including leaking confidential court documents to the media. The documents were public record," Claire interjected, "and encouraging a mob mentality that has resulted in property damage and threats against my clients. This behavior demonstrates unfitness for custody, and—" Judge O'Connell held up a hand. "Mr. Prince, I've read your motions, and while the court is not pleased with the media circus surrounding this case, I see no evidence that Dr. Anderson violated any court orders or laws. The video was properly entered into evidence and became part of the public record. What the media chose to do with that information is not Dr. Anderson's responsibility. But Your Honor, Mr. Prince, your clients are on video committing what appears to be assault of a minor. That is my primary concern, not their hurt feelings about bad publicity." The judge's tone was ice. "Now, let's proceed with testimony. Dr. Patricia Saunders, please take the stand." Patricia's testimony was clinical and damning. She walked through Charlie's injuries, the pattern of old and new bruises, the psychological signs of ongoing abuse. Burton Prince tried to cross-examine, suggesting the bruises could have come from normal childhood activities. "Dr. Saunders, isn't it true that active children often have bruises?" "Yes, but those bruises appear on shins and knees, not upper arms and fingerprint patterns. These injuries are consistent with being grabbed and struck by adults." "But you can't prove." Patricia looked at him coldly. "Mr. Prince, I've been a pediatrician for 23 years. I've documented hundreds of abuse cases. I know the difference between a child who fell off their bike and a child who's been systematically beaten by their family. Charlie Anderson was abused. The evidence is unambiguous." Next, Nolan Schmidt testified about filming the video, about hearing the commotion, about calling the police. Burton Prince tried to paint him as a nosy neighbor with a grudge. "Isn't it true, Mr. Schmidt, that you've had disputes with the Andersons about property boundaries? We had one conversation about a fence line 3 years ago. We resolved it amicably. I filmed what I filmed because a child was being hurt, not because of some imaginary grudge." Then, Charlie was called to testify. Reed's heart clenched as his son was sworn in, looking small and nervous in the witness chair. Judge O'Connell spoke gently to him. "Charlie, I know this is scary. You're being very brave. I just need to ask you some questions about what happened at your grandmother's house, okay?" Charlie nodded. "Can you tell me what happened on December 23rd? Charlie's voice was quiet but steady. He described the incident, how Donnie had been hitting him, how Charlie had pushed back and accidentally knocked over a lamp, how Melinda had gotten angry and called everyone together. Mom said I needed to learn respect. Grandpa said I was a spoiled brat who needed discipline. Then, they all took turns hitting me." "Did your mother hit you too?" "Yes." Charlie's voice cracked. "She hit me the hardest. Then she made me stay outside in the rain. She said I wasn't allowed back in until I learned my lesson." Burton Prince's cross-examination was gentle. He wasn't stupid enough to attack a child witness, but he tried to suggest that Charlie was confused, that the discipline was appropriate, that he'd misunderstood his family's intentions. "Charlie, isn't it true that your parents love you?" "Dad loves me," Charlie said firmly. "I don't think Mom does anymore." "You don't hurt people you love like that." Out of the mouths of babes, Reed thought, watching the judge's expression harden. The final testimony was Reed's. He walked through his growing concerns, Patricia's warning about the bruises, Charlie's changed behavior. Then he described receiving the video, the flight home, the decision to remove his son from danger. "Dr. Anderson," Judge O'Connell asked, "are you seeking full custody?" "Yes, Your Honor. I want my son safe. I want him to never again be in an environment where he's subjected to physical or psychological abuse." Burton Prince stood for cross-examination. "Dr. Anderson, isn't it true that you work long hours at the hospital? That you're often unavailable to your son?" "I work standard surgical shifts, and I've already arranged for reduced hours and flexible scheduling. My son's safety is my priority." "And yet you failed to notice the abuse happening for months, possibly years?" That hit harder than Reed expected. "You're right," he said quietly. "I trusted my wife. I believed her when she said everything was fine. I didn't want to see what was happening because seeing it would mean accepting that the person I married was capable of hurting our child. That's on me. But I see it now, and I will never let it happen again." Burton Prince tried to paint Reed's actions after receiving the video as vindictive and calculated. "You filed complaints with multiple licensing boards, contacted employers, spoke with media. Isn't this just revenge?" "No," Reed said. "It's accountability. These people abused my son. They've abused other children based on the CPS records. They've used their positions of authority and family solidarity to avoid consequences. I made sure the right people knew what they'd done. If that resulted in professional consequences for them, that's not revenge. That's justice." "So you admit you wanted them to suffer?" Reed met Burton Prince's eyes. "I wanted them to face the same scrutiny and judgment they subjected my son to. I wanted them to understand that their actions have consequences. Yes, Mr. Prince. I wanted them to lose their comfortable lives. Because they forfeited the right to those lives when they put their hands on a child." Judge O'Connell called a recess after Reed's testimony. Claire pulled him aside in the hall. "You did good. The judge is on our side. I can tell. But don't celebrate yet. Burton Prince is going to put the Escobars on the stand, and they're going to lie through their teeth." She was right. Melinda testified first, crying, claiming that Reed had misunderstood everything. Charlie was being defiant, disrespectful. "We were trying to teach him right from wrong. It got out of hand, yes, but it was never meant to hurt him. We love that boy." "Then, why did you lock him outside in the rain?" Claire asked on cross-examination. I was angry. I made a mistake. But Reed is using one mistake to destroy my entire family." "One mistake?" Medical records show Charlie had bruises consistent with being grabbed forcefully 2 weeks before this incident. "Another mistake?" Melinda faltered. "Boys get bruises. He was playing rough with his cousin. Your cousin Donnie, who has had CPS called on him twice for violence toward other children? That's not fair." "What's not fair, Miss Anderson, is what you did to your son." Each family member testified, each one claiming the video looked worse than it was, that they were just trying to help discipline Charlie, that Reed was overreacting. They painted themselves as victims of a media witch hunt orchestrated by a vindictive ex-husband. But Judge O'Connell had seen the video. He'd heard Patricia's medical testimony, and he'd listened to Charlie. At 4 p.m., he called court back to order. "I've heard enough," Judge O'Connell said. "This is one of the clearer cases of child abuse I've encountered. 7 adults participated in the systematic physical and psychological abuse of a 9-year-old child. The video evidence is incontrovertible. The medical evidence supports it. The child's testimony supports it." Burton Prince started to object, but the judge cut him off. "I'm granting full legal and physical custody to Reed Anderson. Melinda Anderson's parental rights are suspended pending further evaluation. She will be allowed supervised visitation only, with a court-appointed supervisor. All members of the Escobar family are prohibited from any contact with the minor child." Melinda let out a wail. Her mother started shouting. The courtroom erupted. "Order!" Judge O'Connell's voice cracked like a whip. "Furthermore, I am ordering that the full case file, including the unredacted video, be forwarded to the King County Prosecutor's Office for potential criminal charges. What these adults did constitutes assault of a minor, child endangerment, and possibly criminal conspiracy. That is not for this court to decide, but I am making a formal referral. Reed felt something in his chest loosen, a knot of fear and anger he'd been carrying since that night in Chicago. Charlie was safe, legally, officially protected. As they left the courthouse, Melinda tried to approach them. "Reed, please, we need to talk." "Charlie, baby." Charlie pressed closer to Reed, and Reed put his arm around his son. "Don't," Reed said to Melinda. "You have no right to speak to him. Not after what you did. He's my son." "No," Reed said quietly. "He's my son. You gave up that right when you chose to hurt him." Claire ushered them past the crowd of reporters into Reed's car. As they drove away, Charlie was quiet, processing everything. "Is it really over, Dad?" "The custody part is," Reed said. "You're staying with me. They can't touch you anymore." "What about the other part? The revenge part?" Reed glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean?" "I heard Aunt Charlene lost her blog, and Grandpa lost his job on that committee, and Mom might lose her job too." Charlie looked at him with serious eyes. "Did you do that?" Reed was quiet for a moment, then decided his son deserved honesty. "I made sure that the people who hurt you faced consequences. Real consequences. I used legal means to do it: complaints, public records, information that was already out there. But yes, I wanted them to lose the things they cared about." "Good," Charlie said fiercely. "They deserve it. Maybe. But Charlie, the most important thing isn't that they suffered. It's that you're safe now. That's what matters most." Charlie nodded slowly. "I'm glad you came home. I was so scared that night." "I know, buddy. I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner. But I'm here now, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you again." The fallout continued over the next several weeks. Melinda's social work license was suspended pending investigation. The state board had launched a full review of her cases, concerned that if she'd abused her own child, she might have missed or ignored signs in her professional work. Colleen was terminated from her teaching position after the school's investigation confirmed her participation in the abuse. Heath was passed over for his promotion and quietly encouraged to seek employment elsewhere. Charlene's blog never recovered. Her remaining sponsors dropped her, her followers abandoned her, and she eventually deleted all her social media accounts. Gerald was permanently removed from consideration for the Planning Commission and asked to resign from the community boards he served on. Landon's real estate business took a major hit as clients canceled listings and refused to work with him. Trudy's catering business dried up as word spread through the community. And in February, the King County prosecutor filed criminal charges against all 7 adults: assault of a minor, child endangerment, and criminal conspiracy. The trial was scheduled for May. But Reed's focus wasn't on the legal proceedings anymore. He'd done what he needed to do. The system was handling the rest. His focus was on Charlie. They rebuilt their life together. Reed reduced his hours at the hospital to part-time, taking a position as a consulting surgeon that gave him more flexibility. He and Charlie went to therapy together, both individual and family sessions. They finished the treehouse, planted a garden, took a trip to Yellowstone. Slowly, Charlie started to heal. The nightmares became less frequent. He laughed more easily. He made friends at school, real friends, not just his cousin Donnie. One evening in March, as they were cooking dinner together, Charlie asked, "Dad, do you think I'll ever see Mom again?" Reed considered carefully. "That's up to you. Right now, the court says any visits have to be supervised. But when you're older, if you want to try to have a relationship with her, that'll be your choice." "I don't think I want to." "Is that bad?" "No, buddy, it's not bad. You get to decide who's in your life. You get to decide who deserves your love and trust. And right now, it's okay if that doesn't include her." Charlie nodded, stirring the pasta. "Good. Because I like it being just us." "Me too." In May, the criminal trial resulted in convictions for all 7 defendants. The sentences varied. Melinda got 3 years, suspended with probation and mandatory parenting classes she'd never use. Gerald got 18 months. The others got probation, community service, mandated therapy. It wasn't enough, in Reed's opinion. But it was something, and more importantly, All 7 now had criminal records. They'd carry the consequences of what they'd done for the rest of their lives. Claire called Reed the night after the sentencing. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Reed admitted. "But good. It's really over now." "Reed, I need to ask you something. Looking back, would you do anything differently?" Reed thought about it. "I'd noticed the signs sooner. I'd trust my instincts about Melinda's family. I'd protect Charlie before it ever got to that point. But what I did after I found out? No, I don't regret any of it. They needed to face consequences, and I made sure they did. You know, when you first called me from Chicago, I was worried you were going to do something violent, something that would land you in jail and leave Charlie without either parent. I thought about it," Reed confessed. "For about 5 minutes on that plane. I fantasized about physical revenge, but then I realized I didn't need to hit them. I could hurt them worse by taking away everything they valued. Their reputations, their careers, their standing in the community. That's the revenge that lasts." "Well, you certainly accomplished that. The Escobar family is toxic now. Nobody wants anything to do with them." "Good. Maybe they'll have time to reflect on why that is." They talked for a few more minutes. Then Reed hung up and went to check on Charlie. His son was asleep, one arm around his stuffed dinosaur, peaceful and safe. Reed stood in the doorway and made a silent promise. He'd already kept the most important one. Charlie was safe, but there was another promise, one he made to himself. He would never again ignore his instincts. Never again trust someone just because they were family or because he wanted to believe the best in them. He would be vigilant, protective, the kind of father who saw threats before they materialized. Charlie deserved that, and Reed would spend the rest of his life making sure his son never felt abandoned or afraid again. 1 year later, December 23rd fell on a Tuesday. Reed had taken the day off work, not because of the anniversary, but because Charlie had asked him to. They spent the morning finishing the treehouse, which had evolved from a simple platform into an elaborate structure with walls, a roof, and even a small rope bridge to a second platform in the neighboring tree. It was their project, their shared space. "Dad," Charlie said as they were putting the finishing touches on the roof, "I want to tell you something. I'm listening. I'm not scared anymore. Like, at all. Even when I think about what happened last year, it doesn't make me feel small and helpless. It makes me feel, I don't know, strong, because I survived it, and you made sure they paid for it." Reed climbed down from the ladder and sat next to his son on the treehouse floor. "You were strong, Charlie. You were strong even when they were trying to break you. But I'm glad you don't carry that fear anymore. Dr. Moss says it's because I feel safe now. Because I know you'll always protect me." "Always," Reed confirmed. "No matter what." Charlie was quiet for a moment, then said, "I saw Mom last week, at the grocery store. She tried to talk to me." Reed felt his protective instincts flare. "What did she say?" "She said she was sorry, that she'd made terrible mistakes, that she hoped someday I could forgive her." Charlie looked at his hands. "I just walked away. I didn't want to hear it. That was your choice to make. How do you feel about it?" "I don't know. Part of me wanted to yell at her, tell her how much she hurt me, but mostly, I just felt nothing. Like she's a stranger. That's okay too. Forgiveness isn't mandatory, Charlie. Some things people do are just unforgivable. You don't owe her anything. I know. I just wanted you to know that I saw her, and I didn't feel scared. I felt powerful? Is that weird?" "Not weird at all. You took your power back. That's what matters." They finished the treehouse as the winter sun set early, painting the sky orange and purple. Inside, Reed made hot chocolate, and they sat together watching a movie, comfortable in their routine. The Escobar family had scattered over the past year. Gerald and Trudy had moved to Arizona, unable to stand the whispers and stares in their community. Charlene and Landon had divorced, each blaming the other for their fall from grace. Heath and Colleen had moved to a different state for fresh starts. Melinda still lived in Seattle, working as a cashier at a retail store, her social work career permanently destroyed. She tried several times to reach out to Charlie through the supervised visitation system, but Charlie had refused every time. Eventually, she'd stopped trying. Reed didn't take any satisfaction in Melinda's downfall. She'd made her own choices, and the consequences were her own to bear. But he did feel a deep, quiet satisfaction knowing that Charlie was thriving, that the cycle of abuse had been decisively broken, and that none of those people would ever have the opportunity to hurt his son again. The next morning, Charlie came down to breakfast with a wrapped present. "What's this?" Reed asked. "Open it." Inside was a framed photo, the two of them in the treehouse yesterday, covered in sawdust and grinning at the camera. Charlie must have set up a timer shot. Below the photo, Charlie had written in careful handwriting, "To the best dad ever. Thank you for saving me. Love." Charlie. Reed felt his throat tighten. "Charlie, You came home," Charlie said simply. "When I needed you most, you came home and you made everything right. That's all I ever wanted." Reed pulled his son into a hug. This kid who'd been through hell and come out the other side stronger, braver, more resilient than any 9 now 10-year-old should have to be. "You saved yourself, buddy," Reed said. "You survived. You held on. I just made sure the bad guys paid for what they did. We made a pretty good team." "Yeah," Reed agreed. "We did." As they ate breakfast, Reed thought about the past year, the anger, the careful planning, the systematic destruction of the people who'd hurt his son. Some people might call it revenge. Others might call it justice. Reed thought of it as something simpler. Consequences. The Escobar family had believed they were untouchable, protected by their numbers and their willingness to lie for each other. They believed that family loyalty meant covering up abuse, that their reputation in the community would shield them from scrutiny, that a child's pain was worth less than their pride. Reed had proven them wrong on every count. He'd used their own actions against them, turned their public faces into their downfall, made sure that the truth they'd tried to hide became impossible to ignore. And in doing so, he'd kept his promise to Charlie, that the people who hurt him would face real consequences, that their comfortable lives would crumble, that they would understand finally, truly what it felt like to be powerless and afraid. Was it revenge? Maybe. But it was also justice, protection, and a father's love made manifest in the most practical way possible. Reed had used his intelligence, his resources, and his absolute determination to dismantle a system of abuse one piece at a time. And he'd do it again in a heartbeat if it meant keeping his son safe. "Dad." Charlie's voice brought him back to the present. "What are you thinking about?" Reed smiled. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am to be your father. Even with all the crazy stuff that happened, especially because of it. Because now I know what matters most. And that's you, Charlie. Always you." They finished breakfast and spent the day together, just the two of them, building the life they both deserved, free from fear and surrounded by love. The Escobar family had learned a hard lesson. When you hurt someone's child, you don't just face the consequences. You face a reckoning. And Reed Anderson had made sure that reckoning was thorough, devastating, and absolutely earned. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.